going on, you guys? Today we are back on the Mustang. Now, some of you out there saw my last video with this car. We took it to the track where we started off the night running a 12.2 at 111 miles an hour and ending off that very same night running an 11.2 at 119, which is my personal best in this car. It was actually a great night. Car drove back on the trailer. Didn't really have any issues. The only thing I had a problem with, or was kind of concerned, which is why we didn't make any more passes on the car, is no matter what I did with it, it really didn't like going past 5,800 RPMs. Now, the last time I experienced that kind of issue was, well, there was no timing in it. And this car is only running 28 degrees, which is definitely gonna, well, keep it from getting the RPMs quicker or getting up there in the RPMs. Another thing was on the last engine I had in this car was valve springs. It was floating the valves. I mistook it for bouncing off the rev limiter, which is why I turned the rev limiter up. Anyways, a whole bunch of things I did that night ended up destroying that engine. So when I came up against that same problem with this car, 5,800 RPMs, it's like, you know what? I know when I rebuilt these heads, the springs were already kind of lacking in the pressure department. They did pretty good on seat pressure or closed, but they were definitely lacking open pressure. It was about, if I remember, without going back, probably around 50 or 60 PSI shy of what the cam card recommended for it. So instead of giving it any more timing or pushing this thing any harder, we packed it up. Finished out the night just hanging out with friends or our family, watching other neat little things go down the track. Brought it back here, unloaded it. As you can see now, I've got this thing all torn apart because we are changing the springs in it. As a matter of fact, this side here is already done. All the springs have been changed. Come on over to the passenger side as well. All the springs up front have changed except for these last two here. And that's because I kind of want to go over you guys with what I'm doing, the tools I'm using. And for any of you that have wondered how to change springs while the heads are still in the car, I figured this would be a good time to show you. So I am also going to show you guys, here's one of our old springs. And I put it up against one of our new springs. I came on over here to our vise where I dug out my little pressure gauge. And I tested the springs that were in the engine, and well, seat pressure was only just above 100 PSI, so it had already fatigued or lost seat pressure. Open pressure was around 260 to 280, which was another 50 or 60 down from where we ended off putting them in the heads. And of course, like I said, they were already that much shy of what the cam card recommended. So springs were definitely an issue in this thing. So I'm glad I decided not to run it any harder that night. Another thing I wanted to show you guys is, here is my blow-off valve. This is an eBay style blow-off valve. And if you look in here, kind of looks normal, except it's missing the little plunger piece that's supposed to go on the end and hold that O-ring in. Because this little guy decided it was going to come apart. There's the other piece. Lucky for me, it is the size it is. You can see the ring there. Not real sure how long it decided to hang out there. But I am extremely lucky that thing did not go through the engine. And the fact that there's no nut on the other end. It actually has the threads in it. There's just no, there's no Loctite, no nothing. So I will put that valve back together. Make sure to put Loctite on it and possibly ping the threads. Try to keep that thing from coming apart again. Like I said, extremely lucky that that's the size it is and I didn't destroy this engine. So I'll get you set up on a little tripod real quick. Like I said, I want to show you the difference between my new spring and the spring we just took out of this thing. So, be back in a sec. All right, got you set up on the tripod. We're over here with my vise and this little guy right here. Like I said, we're going to compare my new spring here against this old spring that we pulled out of the head. Now this is the one that we used to rebuild our heads with when I put this, or when I first put this engine together. It's got to be close to a couple years ago now. So it's not like they've worked, haven't really failed, but I do remember, well, let's just go ahead and compare them. So here's our gauge, here's our spring. We'll try to do this without running on for too long. Let's open this guy all the way up. That is not a good thing to do. All right. Set you up. See, our gauge is on 0. Okay, got some pressure on there. Now, if you're wondering, install height of that spring was, let's see, I can get it in there for you so you can see it. There you go. 181. Whoops. There you go. 1.81 was the installed height of the spring. So that's what we're going to go ahead and show you what closed or seat pressure was. Okay, and you just go till you touch. All right, just barely touching. Okay. Yep, it's actually slightly tighter, but that's all right. You can see on that gauge there, we're 120 seat pressure. Now this spring is actually a tad bit higher than a few of the other ones I took out. Now we're going to go ahead. I'm not going to run through open pressures and all that stuff because, I mean, after this, you'll kind of get the point. We lost pressure. So here's our new spring. Get that set up so you can see we were on 0. Go ahead and run it to the same 181 install height. All right. Here we go, just touching. You can see on there we are at 180. See, I'll get you close. Maybe get you a little bit closer so you can see that. 180 psi seat pressure, which is a lot more than what those other springs had. So just that alone tells you how much pressure we have lost. Like I said, when I installed these springs, when we first rebuilt those heads, they were roughly around 140, 145. This one didn't lose as much as some of the other ones. As a matter of fact, some of the other ones were between 90 and 100, 100, 110, this being on one of the high sides. So either way, springs had to be changed out. Wanted to give you a reference to how much more pressure that these new springs are going to provide. So open pressure on this, matter of fact, while we're here, let's go ahead and do that so you guys can see. So we're just above 0. I did that too. Let's zero it out. Center everything up. Make sure we all are good. Put a little bit of pressure on there. Okay. 181. I'm going to go ahead and zero that out. Going to add the cam lift, which is a 552 and a 563. We'll go ahead and go to We'll just go 560. We'll split the difference. Oops. 552. 560. Now we'll go, yep, there we go. So we went ahead and closed it up. There you go. 0.560. We're going to run this all the way to that guy, just so you can see what kind of pressure we have on these springs with our valves all the way open. There you go, just touching. There we go, right there, perfect. Boom. So open pressure, we are at 365. Probably should have done all this. So here's our old spring. We're going to put it on the same cam lift, just so you have that kind of reference as well. Show you the numbers. Still 0.562. Go ahead and close that guy all the way up so you can see the difference. Now, boom. Just touching. We're at 265 open. So there is a 100 PSI difference with our springs. So that alone shows you what kind of problem we will have, or what kind of problem I would have trying to get this car to RPM. It just seemed like it was floating the valves again, and that is roughly the same PSI we had on the old springs before we rebuilt it. But new springs, much heavier, definitely a lot more spring to get those things back. Valves won't hang open as long, so this should cure that little issue. So I'll go ahead and get set up here real quick. Go run through what I am, the tools I am using, and how I'm changing these out with the heads still in the car. So be right back. All right, got myself all set up. First thing you want to do really is get all of the spark plugs out. That way, if there's an issue between cylinder and cylinder, it'll help you determine whether or not you have an issue there, like if you've got a blown head gasket in between cylinders. Another thing too, you pull your radiator cap off. This will also help tell you if you have a blown head gasket going into the water jacket. So there's a lot of different things to help you out when changing the springs in the car. But first off, like I said, pull all the spark plugs, pull the radiator cap. Now what you want to do, I'm going to use a power probe on the solenoid here. If you don't have one of these, you can have somebody in the car to help you out. But basically, just rotate the engine over as soon as I find good contact. So we got exhaust going down, intake going down. There's our exhaust, intake. So at this point, as you can see there, we have taken the load off our rockers, and our gem or our polylocks here are handy. So tells me we are good to go there. Put this out of my way. Now we're going to take this little hose here, has an O-ring. Just run that down till you feel the O-ring hit. And it just goes right in where the spark plug's at. Now I know a lot of you out there have probably already done this, but some of you guys out there have not and have just wondered how you would change your springs while the heads are still in the car. And this is how you do it, using a cylinder leak down test tool. Run it in. Just use your hand. Make sure it's snug up against the O-ring. Plug in our hose. come on over here, run some air pressure. Now I've been running these about 70 psi. And I have obviously, so this is telling me it is bleeding by somewhere. And I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but it is actually coming out the exhaust, and that's because I am up against the valve. But if you come on over here and look in our radiator, there is no bubbles, so we are not bleeding by any air there. Everything looks good. I don't hear anything coming out of the throttle body, so we are good there. I'll go ahead and just bleed the pressure off. Rotate this thing over a little bit more. Boom. Add our pressure back. I am up against all the valves now, so no big deal. Go ahead and just back these guys off. There we go. So, got everything backed off. Let's come in here and see. Nothing holding our rockers on anymore. I am not hearing anything come out of our throttle body, nor am I hearing anything come out of our exhaust. Important thing is make sure you line all these up in the way you took them off. That way they go back in the exact same spot you took them off. Go ahead and pull our push rods out. Make sure those go back. Now another thing too, you can use one of these tools. This is like a cheap tool that I picked up from Harbor Freight a few years ago. It basically just goes down and around the springs. And then you turn this here and it collapses the spring. It is kind of a pain to use a tool like this because some of these springs are pretty tight. I, on the other hand, am going to be using this guy here. This is a tool that I made when we rebuilt these heads and put them back together the first time. And I built it just to go over our rocker studs. I'm using a couple of nuts here to help space it off. Put these guys in here. I'm sure you can probably find something like this on the internet. I like dropping things on the floor and making my own tools. Go ahead and get that one started. I did hear it hit the ground, so I am not too concerned about it. In fact, go ahead and grab it real quick. Yeah. One of the nicest, or some of you can agree, as long as you hear things hit the ground, you're good. It's when you don't hear them hit the ground is when you start panicking. Whether it ended up in the engine, somewhere important. But, so. Got that guy in there. And I don't go super tight. I just go till it's snug. That's it. Now, before I go ahead and put in our bolt and my little, this guy here to start collapsing the spring, I do want to go over a sound real quick because it may or may not save you. Now, I should have probably done this before putting that tool on, but I like to get ahead of myself as well. So, what you want to do is just make sure to tap on the retainer when you have air pressure in there. Because if the retainer is stuck to our keepers, you hear the sound come out the intake there. And of course, when you come over to the exhaust, You hear it blow through the exhaust. And what I do is I'll tap the retainer to make sure it's not stuck to the keepers. And that, no sound came out the exhaust, and I visibly watched that move, so that is not stuck. Do the same on the intake. And that noise is telling me they're still stuck to the retainers, or the keepers are stuck to the retainers, so didn't make the noise now. I just broke it free. So that is one thing you do want to pay attention, because it may or may not release all the air pressure you have in the cylinder, allowing it to jump past your keepers and drop a valve in the engine. So there are some dangers or some concerns, things you want to look out for if you're going to do this kind of work with it on the car. Like I said, as long as you don't hear it come through the throttle body or carburetor or the exhaust when you tap on the retainer, you're good to go. Now, my homemade piece here, go ahead and set that guy on top of the retainer. As a matter of fact, it's just a piece of pipe with an old spring retainer on top and a bearing. That way the bolt isn't like shaving itself. This rotates as I'm tightening it. So we just run it in. And the little end of this tool too is tapered, and that is so actually gives me options. Depending on how I have everything set up, I can rotate it to get the best seat against our springs. Like right there gave me the best seat against it. Go ahead and tighten it up. Get that camera in there, you can watch the spring push down, leaving the retainers somewhat in place. So there's one of our retainers. Go ahead and grab the other one from the other side. It's actually telling me I gotta go down a little bit farther. Now, both our retainers are out. And you do, while you're doing this too, kind of try to make sure you're not binding anything up. Last thing you want to do is break the seal between that valve and the valve seat, because the second you do that, you will drop that valve in the engine, which forces you to pull the head and totally defeats the whole purpose of all of this. So there's the spring we are replacing. Here's our retainer. Go ahead and throw that down there with the other ones. Now, I am replacing the shim that goes between the spring and the head as well. In order for me to do that, this is just an upholstery tool that I got from my local auto parts store. It goes between door panels, the plastic clips. You get down in here, I'm using it because it is like the perfect setup to get underneath our valve seal. Just apply slight pressure, enough to pop our seal up. Now don't force it off, you just rotate it around. It'll slide off actually fairly easily once you find that sweet spot. Go ahead and put that up in there. Grab my magnet. Remove our factory spring cup and washer underneath. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the old springs that are in this head needed to be at a closer install height. Our new springs do not need to be at that height. So go ahead and replace that. Grab some oil. Make sure there is plenty of oil on that pad there. Don't ever put springs in without the washers or shims, because those springs will destroy the head. Aluminum heads more so than cast iron, but if you can put a shim underneath there to help eliminate some wear and tear, do it. And plus they do help you set up your spring pressures. But you got that guy in there, go ahead and pop our valve seal back in place, rotating it down, pushing it down with our fingers, nice and snug. We are all put back in place. Grab some oil, make sure we got oil all across the top of that shim. Grab our new spring, drop it in place. I like to turn it to make sure there is oil spread out evenly throughout the bottom of the spring. So don't be stingy with the oil, make sure everything's got oil on it. Valve, stem, spring, seat, all that stuff. Go ahead and make sure there's no debris or anything on your retainer. This all looks really good. Slide that guy back in place. Grab our little cup here, put it back on the spring. Make sure we line the bolt up to the bearing, which we have. Set everything up to keep it from binding. Rotate it. There we go. Tighten it back up. Said make sure you pay attention and watch. You don't want to clip that valve stem and push it down to break that seal. So always check. You can see we are collapsing our spring. And we are just about ready to install our keepers. Put that guy in place. Here. It is definitely nice to have little magnets, so if you don't have one, do grab one. Go to off the internet or Harbor Freight. I think that's where these came from, because they are a lifesaver when it comes to stuff like this. Got that one sitting on here. That guy sitting there. Grab another clip. See it coming up. And there you go. That valve spring, that new valve spring is installed using this homemade part and our cylinder leak down tool. So now what I'll do is, now that I've showed you guys that, I'll go ahead and move along to our last spring here. I'll get that swapped out, throw our rockers on. Actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and finish that spring, and I'll be right back. All right, all our springs are changed out. 90% of our rockers are installed. I went ahead, put the plugs in, valve cover, got that whole side buttoned up. And while everything was off, I went ahead and double checked the torque on our head bolts as well. Everything turned out pretty good. So this side, as you guys saw, I left these two rockers off just in case any of you guys have ever wondered how to set up the preload or how to set up your hydraulic rocker or the rockers on a hydraulic cam. So that's what I'm going to do. And here we go. So basically, leave your spark plug out, turn the engine over to where you are hitting on top dead center. Let me get down here, see if you can see the lines. There we go. Engine is sitting at top dead center. Both of these push rods are all the way down and they are even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set our rockers up on our push rods. I'm just going to set them there. I'm not going to put our bolts on yet or our poly locks. And if you're ever wondering, on our rockers, you can see one side. Actually, I'm going to throw her. See, it's rounded, and on this side it's flat. Make sure you at least you get these orientated correctly, because if you don't, you're going to destroy these things. So flat side is for our locks. So I'm just going to set those on there. You can see they're even. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my little power probe here, hold pressure on our push rods, bump the engine over. All right, so now my exhaust rocker just started to get pushed up, which tells me my intake should be really close to sitting on the base of the cam. So now what I'm going to do is just going to put our lock on our intake rocker, go till it touches. Once it touches, I'll grab our wrench. And they say go quarter to half turn. I always go quarter turn. So from there, 90 degrees is a quarter turn. Then I'll grab my Allen wrench, use my wrench's backup, run our screw all the way down till it touches, and then go ahead and tighten it up. So now our intake is set and locked. Now that that one's sitting there, we'll go ahead and bump it over again. Exhaust is still pushing. Now our intake is opening, which should, just as it starts to close right there, that tells me our exhaust should be really close to sitting on the base of the cam. And again, take your lock, screw it all the way down until it touches. Once it touches, grab your wrench, quarter to half turn. Again, I always just do a quarter, just like that. Take your Allen wrench, run it all the way down, use our wrench, and we are locked. Now if you get in there and look really close, you can see all of these lock screws are pretty much the same distance from the top of our bolts. So pay attention to those. If you see any that are farther down or farther up, you see any of them that are drastically out of place from one another, double check that one. You may have a problem. It may be not sitting in the rocker all the way or not sitting in the lifter all the way. Either way, there is some kind of issue. So pay attention, make sure all those are relatively the same. And that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do now is I'll go ahead and get the valve cover on, get our spark plug wires hooked up, fire this thing up, let it warm up, and burn all this oil off the exhaust. So I'll be right back. All right, everything's buttoned up, valve covers are on, spark plugs are in, wires are on. Went ahead and hooked up our breather system as well. So now I'll go ahead and get you in the stand. Fire this thing up, let it warm up. So it is going to get a little bit of smoke in here. I did spill quite a bit of oil on those things, so we'll keep an eye on it, but let's go ahead and fire it up, let it warm up, see how she sounds. All right. Got you in the stand there. Get a bird's eye view in case anything decides to get launched into space. Already turned on. Fingers crossed. see. And shut it off so you guys can hear me a little better, but sounds pretty good. Got no weird noises from the rockers or from the valve train or anything like that, so that's good. I'm definitely excited to see what kind of improvement we've made by installing our new springs. Something I've needed to do for a long time, and I probably would have gone on a lot sooner if I had realized that those springs down there would have gotten that weak that fast. So if any of you guys have these heads, I believe they're like the Pro Comp heads. They're only, I bought them a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, for $550. They've been rebuilt once. You guys see it on the channel, and they've been port matched, so they've been working out fairly well. But the springs leave a little bit to be desired. So if you guys have a set of these, chances are they're probably gotten weak over the years. So you might want to check into that. But like I said, I'm glad we got it. I'm glad I was able to retain or keep from making more and more passes to actually just recognize that I was having the same issue as I was before. So otherwise, you know what? And really, otherwise, that other engine would probably still be in this car if I'd have just stepped back. But I wanted to go, 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 go. I grenaded it up. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have the 351 Windsor. So anyways, I got to get the suspension all. I got to get all this stuff put back together so I can take this thing out on a test drive. But I am going to end this video right here. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button for me if you haven't already. I'm looking forward to getting this thing back out on the track. That way we can improve our time. So again, you guys, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all your guys' support. And I'll see you on the next one.